Hey y'all, it's Brittany MeeChel here, and welcome to an episode of The Grieving Worshipper. Listen, these happen few and far between right now because I'm currently in a process of just kind of understanding my purpose, understanding my reason, understanding my why. But one of my major whys is my daddy. I lost him in 2020, and his life and his death has given me much reason to dive fully into my purpose. And the word of the Lord tells us that you overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. And so I realize most days in my life, all I have is my testimony. All I have is the space in me that is transparent and open to share with people where I am, and to be honest enough to say that where I am is not always at its best, but it is a part of a process that God is currently taking me through. And I fully believe that the end of it is going to be full of purpose and reason, and that hopefully I would have touched somebody's life along the way. So I wanted to share with you my experience over this last week. And I'm just kind of going to jump right into it because I think that it is important for me to be honest about where I am. It is a part of my healing process for me to share the space that I'm currently in. I don't like to show up to spaces with this idea that I'm all together. The only reason why I can appear whole is because of the work that I do before I get to a place, right? And I am consistently working to live out a life that is healed, whole, and well. And I'll get into some more of that later. But today I wanted to talk about something that I experienced a few years ago and was triggered this past week. And it's called survivor's remorse or survivor's guilt. I found myself this past week plagued once again with COVID. And in finding out I had COVID, I initially felt this weight hit me. Somewhat of depression. Some of it was just like annoyed. And honestly, the first day, I just wanted to go to sleep. And when I woke up through the night, I felt awful. I felt awful, and I was immediately triggered because 2020, I lost my father to COVID. And during that time, we all had COVID. It started this spiral. My godson had it. He was asymptomatic, and I had it. And then it just kind of passed around. And so unfortunately, my father had underlying conditions and he was unable to fight the virus. And he passed away October 21st of 2020. I battled for a long time, probably about the first 6 to 8 months after his passing. I battled with it being my fault. I struggled with trying to come to grips with the fact that there was nothing I could have done differently. And I struggled a lot with self-blame and believing that had I done something differently, then maybe his outcome would have been different. And so here I am, 3 years later, almost about in the same season that starts the downtrod of life, right? So here we are, September 17th, roughly a month prior to his death date. And I am feeling all of the same feelings I felt in that first stretch of after his passing. And it has been identified as survivor's remorse. And I want to speak to it because it put me, for about 2-3 days this week, put me in a very, very dark place that for me, I felt like, man, I should be past this, right? I should not be feeling these same type of feelings the same way that I felt them 3 years ago. But I literally felt for about a couple days this angst, this weight in me of fear, a little anxiety, that honestly, I can't tell you why. I can't tell you what makes you believe these things. I can't tell you what it is that sets it off in you, but I can tell you that it is real. I can tell you that on Tuesday when I woke up, I thought to myself for a brief moment that lingered a little bit longer than I wanted it to. What if my mother has to bury me too? I suffer with asthma, which is odd because I'm a singer, and most of the time people don't know I have asthma as bad as I do. But I struggled Tuesday morning with breathing. And I ended up getting up and needing to find my inhaler. And I thought to myself, Lord, if this is how it's going to be again, take me now. Because I don't want to suffer. I don't want to go through 10 days. My father was in the hospital 10 days on a ventilator and all of the things. I didn't want to go through any of those things. Like, Lord, if this is what it's going to be, take me now. And I can be honest enough to say that those thoughts just came with the pain and the agony of what my reality is, that my father didn't make it. And somewhere along the way, I started to put into play the things that I have done over the last few years to help me process. But I want to talk specifically about survivor's remorse because I want to help somebody who may or may not have the tools that I now have to handle their process. So what survivor's remorse is, and it's an actual thing, you will see it as either survivor's remorse or survivor's guilt. Survivor's remorse and or guilt is defined as a post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a part of PTSD. And it is a psychological state experienced by someone who has survived a traumatic event that caused harm to others but left the individual unharmed. I'm going to read that again. It is a psychological state experienced by someone who has survived a traumatic event that caused harm to others but left the individual unharmed. Ultimately, we all made it through the pandemic in different ways. Some of us survived the pandemic. Some of us found strength in the pandemic. Some of us found purpose. Some of us experienced a lot of pain. However, the pandemic overall was a traumatic experience. For most of us, being that we were trapped in our homes, couldn't leave, which was completely against the norm of what we're used to. And so, that being my reality, I found myself not being able to leave the house now in 2023 when I have the liberty to go whenever I want to. And feeling that state of being trapped again and not being able to leave was triggering for me. And so I found myself Tuesday morning being extremely emotional and scared that this time I wouldn't survive. Or why is it that I'm going to survive again and my father didn't survive the first time? And I started to feel this weight that makes me sometimes question why me, or why not me? Why not take me? Why was I able to live through this and now live through it a second time and he didn't have the same liberty now? And even now it was even harder because we're in a day and time where you can go 5 days of isolation, and then if your symptoms are gone, whether you have a positive COVID test or not, you can leave your home with a mask on. I was completely triggered because it was the recklessness of living and things being in the air and all of these things, not taking certain precautions that I felt like my family was taking when we were hit with COVID in October of 2020. I felt like it was happening to me again. And I found myself experiencing survivor's remorse. I had a lot of questions, again, for God, asking him, why is this happening again? Because at this point in my life, I've not had COVID since 2020. I've not had COVID since the month that we had it. And then the protocols were a lot different. We were all trapped at home, right? But in that time, in 2020, you had to isolate for 14 days before you could even get retested. Now here we are, able to isolate, and if you feel okay, put a mask on, even though people might or might not. Put a mask on and go on about your life for the next 5 days or until you decide you feel better. It scared me. It made me angry. It made me have questions for humanity as to why we don't care enough to care for other people and their health. Because my fear at this point was that if I go out here with a mask on, I still have the ability to infect somebody who cannot fight it the way that my body is able to fight it. And I was triggered. I've been so triggered this past week. And for me, sharing this space with you allows me more of a space for me to heal and be able to tell somebody that you are not alone if you've experienced this. And it helps me to feel like I'm not by myself. And so I've spent the last couple days trying to get better. I'm not fully at 100%, but I have tested negative, which was a whirlwind of emotions. I cried and cried and cried and cried because I still feel this fear, am I safe to be around people? What if it's not all gone? What if that was a false negative? Because the day before I took an at-home test and it still said positive. And then I took another at-home test, it still said positive. And then I went another day, went throughout the day, and then took this test Friday and it says negative. And at this point, I feel better in my body, but I've lost a lot of strength. Like my strength is just not 100%. But I don't have any cold symptoms anymore. I don't have a fever. And so according to the doctor, I am good to go. But still, it left me with a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. And I wanted to speak to that in people. So on Friday, I texted my therapist and I let her know kind of where I was. And she gave me a few practical things that I could do within my day to help me fight past and wade through the anxiety that I was experiencing because of survivor's remorse. So I want to share with you a couple things. So a few examples of survivor's remorse, and maybe COVID is not your example. If you know somebody who was in a car accident and one person passed away and the other person walked away unharmed, or ended up in the hospital but woke up later and found out that the person that they were with passed away, they can experience survivor's remorse. If you have been in a space, I have a cousin whose brother was shot and killed a few months ago, and he struggles with, why not me? That is identified as survivor's remorse. And I think it's important in our community that we put the proper words to these things so that we handle people well. Because we don't want to brush past the things that people need serious help to walk them through. I thank God for my faith. I thank God for my strength in my faith, that now I fight with different tools, and I am not as consumed by my emotions as I have once been. But because of my experience and because of how God has brought me through, I am on a different side of grief and pain and processing that allows me to identify these things and apply this to my life every day. And so my turnaround is a little bit faster, but I'm still processing. So I want to share a couple things that I feel like are important to do if you ever experience survivor's remorse. One of the things to do is that you need to find a positive mantra to recite to yourself and repeat over and over again as your anxiety passes. My mantra for the last week has been, God is in control and He knows what's best. I trust that God is in control and He knows what's best. Because I've decided to make Jesus my choice and over time have reaffirmed myself in my faith to believe that He has a plan for my life, I have been able to reestablish myself in a way and allow myself to be affirmed that everything I've experienced is for my good and for God's glory. And even the pain of losing my father, even where I sit right now, although it's not perfect and it's very, very heavy some days, I fully believe that even in my suffering, it is for my good and God's glory. I believe that everything has happened for a reason, and it is for my good and God's glory. Now, that's a decision that I've made, and it's a decision that I continue to make for myself. It is a decision that I have decided for myself is the thing that is going to give me hope to keep moving forward when it feels easier to quit. So my mantra is, I trust that God knows best and that God is in control. I trust that God is in control and He knows what's best. That's my mantra. That's what I've been saying for the last couple of days as my anxiety rises. So a second thing that you can do, or that I believe that you need to do if you ever experience survivor's remorse, and I think as you experience grief in general, you need to have a safe space to share. For me, my safe place is my therapist, or through podcasting, or sharing my experience with others. I find safety in taking care of people and being able to share with them where I've come from and walk the path with them. That feels safe for me. But my main safe place this week was being able to have access to my therapist, and being able to contact her and say, hey, this is where I am. Send help. Like, you got to do something. I need you to say something. I need you to give me something so that I can get past this moment. I also have friends and family that I believe I can trust with my vulnerability in this space. So I believe that everybody needs a safe place to share. And that safe place needs to be, when I say safe, I mean be able to hear and understand the worst of where you are. And so I think that is very important as we go forward. And then lastly, the third thing that I have found strength in while experiencing survivor's remorse is, do not take ownership of the things you have no power to control. Do not take ownership of the things you have no power to control. Oftentimes I think about my father's death and I live so heavily in the what ifs. I live heavily in, what if I would have done something different? And what if I would have stayed away longer? Or was it my fault? Was it in the air? Did he get it from me? What happened? Why did it happen this way? But rather I redirect my mind to help me understand that I was not in control then of what was happening, and I'm not in control now. And so I put my hope in Jesus. I've made Jesus my choice. I've made God the center of what I stand on to be able to move forward. And I fully believe and I trust that God is in control and He knows what's best. And so I believe that when you feel like it is wrong for you to have survived, I think that you need to be reminded that there is reason for you. There is a necessity for who you are and what you bring to this earth in this timing. And then it's helpful for you to believe and be reminded that the loved ones that you miss and that have gone on have completed exactly what they were intended to do on this earth. There is no unfinished work. They have done what they were supposed to do. They have given what they were supposed to give. And it was their time to move on. That it's often harder to accept depending on how you lose people, and I fully understand that. But I realize that everything that has happened in its time, I have the ability to heal from, and I have the ability to live through. And I believe that for you as well. And so I want you to be encouraged. I hope that you hear what I'm saying if you've ever experienced this, and that maybe you can find strength in the fact that I've come through, and you will too. And I want you to remember the people, even if only one person, that need you to survive. I need you to find within yourself one reason to keep going, to keep trying, to keep surviving until you find yourself in a place of thriving. It's not easy, but it's possible. I'm not telling you these things because I've gotten it all right. Listen, I had a hard few days. It was hard. And I'm going to share with you a piece of my journey. So I did some documenting one day, which is another thing that helped me when I have anxiety or am experiencing anxiety due to PTSD from COVID related situations or just grief in general. I go to the cemetery. It is the quietest place and it is the safest place for me. I feel connected and I feel close to my father, and that was always a safe place for me. And so I go to the cemetery, and so I went to his grave, and I'm saying this is what worked for me. This may not work for you, but what worked for me in the moment was I went and I walked where he is buried, and there's a fountain. There's a springing fountain of water, and it was just so peaceful, and it helped me process some of my emotions, and I talked it out. And so I'm going to share with you a piece of that. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I thought through while I was out there, and hopefully it encourages you to lean in to your emotions. Don't fight them away, because initially I wanted to tell myself, you're fine. You don't feel this. You're okay. Get over it. You just have COVID. You're just going to be sick for a couple days. You're going to be all right. But I had to lean in because I couldn't just brush it off. I needed to process what I was feeling, give identity to it so that I could also overcome it. I needed to speak to what was actually happening to me. And I think in our community, what we don't do enough is give words to and give identity to the things that we're actually dealing with, so that we can properly learn how to combat them and to overcome them. And so in closing, if you will, I have my little notes here because I wanted to make sure that I just shared the deepest part of where I was. It is important for me to always be open and transparent with my journey. And I am so grateful for you for taking the journey with me and loving me enough to not judge me through my process, but let me process and be better as time goes on. And so I fully believe for my father and for my current life that we are healed, we are whole, and we are well while we go through. Even in the state that we're in right now, listen, there is not a future version of you that deserves to be loved better than who you are right now. And so I hope that you are encouraged. I hope that if you are experiencing survivor's remorse, that you would find resources to give you strength, that you would talk to someone. And if you don't have a direct line of communication with a therapist, please inbox me, please email me, comment, say something, because I am certainly willing to help you get the help that you deserve. I'm going to share a clip of where I was the other day in my journey, and hopefully it empowers you. Hopefully it gives you strength to keep going. And if nothing else, it can let you see that you're not alone, and that where you are, where you have been, is not the end. There is still life to be lived, and you can get past where you are right now. It's not easy, but it's possible.
The idea of healing is weird because it insinuates that you're going to come to this point where everything is together, right? But then there's actually this reality of healing, that it is healing and it is continual, which means that it's going to always be something that has to continue to take place. I'm currently walking out at the cemetery where my father is buried. As I struggle a little bit with having COVID over the last week, COVID being the thing that he passed away from. And here I am in September, 3 years later, feeling this angst and this anxiety of what I know happened 3 years ago. But I didn't know then what was happening, right? And so I'm struggling with this idea that there was nothing I could have done differently. And I'm healing continually because I feel like I should be further past this space. And I am just constantly thinking about the fact that what happened then had to happen the way that it did for me to even consider God's perfect will for where I am right now. I'm struggling with it being His perfect will. I'm struggling with it being in His plan that it had to happen that way. I'm thinking about every day that led up to October 21st, today being September 15th. Whoa. All right, buddy. But I'm thinking about every day that led up to it, the things that we were doing, the plans that we had, the way that we handled the moments, not knowing that they were final moments. And something in me is hurting still. Something in me is still trying to figure out why this is my story. Like, why is this my reality? Some of me is like, this is unfair. Some of me has accepted that this is just what it is. And then other parts of me is just missing my daddy. And that's the strange part of healing. Grieving, it comes in these waves that you can't control, and I think that's the point. And that you've got to put your hope and your faith in something that is actually in control, because you are not. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand it all. I don't know what it's for. I don't know if there's purpose behind it. I know that this is where I am right now. Lots of uncertainty. Lots of discomfort. But also lots of faith that where I am, what I'm experiencing, has purpose. And I don't know, will teach me something. I don't really have any innuendos. I don't really have any encouraging words other than to keep going through the process. Keep healing. Letting myself actually feel this pain that I feel today, that I feel like I shouldn't feel, because it's been 3 years and you should be past this. You know better. You know what happened. But still I feel it. So today I'm letting myself feel it. I've cried a lot. I have replayed so many moments from 2020. So many what ifs. So many whys. And today, I'm just letting myself feel it. And I think even that means I'm healing. So, here's to that.